Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to topic 15. In this topic, we're going to be seeing how to put up the materials and the shadows for the elevation. So let's get straight to it. Well guys, when we're talking about the material settings, it's going to be the same way itself. So we can just go up to, let's say, this top side wall where I'll start from. I'll just double click on this and I'll go to pattern overlay. Over here, I can easily go ahead and add, let's say, this concrete texture, something like this. Even this would be fine, and I can easily go and scale it down, something like this, and we can reduce the size. So guys, once I'm done with this, I can press OK, and you can see how we can see the grains on this particular layer, right? And what we can do is, once we are done with this much, we can actually right click and copy this layer style, and I'll just go ahead and paste it here as well, right? And I'll even go ahead and I'll just paste it here. Now, if we want, instead of pasting it over here, what we can do is we can double click on the bottom mid, give it a pattern overlay of, let's say, this kind of a cladding, which is basically a stone cladding that we can do, something like this. I can just reduce their opacity, and I can just copy this layer style and I can paste it in the top mid as well, something like this. So we have the front, the middle of the entire bungalow, which is going to be cladded, and we'll actually be putting up different layers in our we'll be giving the different material to our pergolas. All right, so before I go ahead with that, guys, I'll just be selecting this bottom stair, right click and copy the layer style, and I'll be pasting it on our stairs as such. So I think now we have kind of figured out the basic material overlay, and I can even put that on the water tank, because we have the water tank, which is again, it's going to be concrete exterior, so I'll just paste the layer style there as well. If you want, you can double click on this and you can just kind of give it a pattern overlay and kind of just reduce its opacity so it gets a little bit more grayer, or you can even give it a color overlay and reduce the opacity to just have it a little bit more darker than the rest of the building. Now, when we talk about the windows, guys, right, we're not going to be giving a pattern overlay as say over here. What we'll be doing is we'll actually be providing a gradient overlay. So that is going to make it look like this, you know, the entire tinting and the reflection of the entire window. So I'll just double click on this and I'll enter into the gradient overlay. So this is something new that we have entered now into. And in the gradient overlay, you guys can see over here that it's opacity, gradient, radial, which is the style, and angle and scale, right? So what we're going to do, guys, first is we're going to change the style to linear. So as you guys can see, linear will actually set it to go in a like kind of a linear manner. Apart from this, we have radial, right, which will basically be like a radius. Like you can see in the center, it's getting darker and then it kind of diffuses. Then we have angle, which is basically going to be angle. So if I kind of change the angles over here, you'll see how it kind of rotates. It will be more like an angle cut over here, as you can see. Then we've got reflected, which is basically going to be dark in the center and then light on both the sides. And we're going to have diamond, which is like a diamond. Similar how radial is, this will be like a diamond cut. Alright guys, so what we're going to do, as you can even see all of the gradients over here itself. So whichever one I switch on, you can actually see how it's going to be. So dark and light, right? The angle is going to be something like this. Radial will be something like this, and linear will be something like this. Alright guys, so what I want you guys to understand is we are going to be using linear for this, and I'm just going to change the angle, and I can just reduce the opacity and actually reduce the scale slightly. And I can press OK. So we've got something like this, which is really dark to light all the way. You can give individual gradients, but then you have to create individual layers for each of the windows. So this will have a separate layer, this will have a separate layer, this will have a separate layer. And I find it to be better when we give it all together, because we actually are considering the bungalow as a whole rather than each window separately. Alright, now the next thing over here is our railing. So I'll just double click on this and I'll give this a gradient overlay too, considering it to be a glass railing. Again, we'll shift it to linear. We can increase the scale, kind of just change the angle slightly, right, whichever one we are able to work with. And I can just reduce this opacity, something like this, guys. And you can see now how we have actually kind of given a little bit life to this entire elevation because of the materials. Of course, what is not given yet is the pergolas, which we will be giving to right now. But remember, after that, we still have to work with our shadows. And I'm going to be showing you guys how to use drop shadow and inner shadow to actually provide life to a elevation, a front view. Now, when we talk about the pergolas, guys, we can actually give it wooden pergolas, but I would prefer not, because the backing is also brownish. So I can actually let it be white. We can actually even let these pergolas be white. So what I can do is I can select all these layers. How do I do that? Basically all these boxes. You can see we are on the pergola layers, right? And I can just press Control and click on this box. So what will happen is the entire layer will get selected and all the boxes automatically will get selected which are on the layer. By pressing, I'll just show you that again. We'll press Control and click on this brush symbol or on the box what is there in your screen, and you can see all these layers everything on the layer basically gets selected. And what happens because of that is we can actually now change the color, and I can press Alt backspace to fill the color over there. So we actually have now white colored pergolas, which will actually give a very good contrast to our background. And I'll just double click on this layer and I'll give it a drop shadow. That's actually going to be the first thing which I start with my shadows is the pergolas. I can increase the distance slightly as well as the size. So we have this, light kind of shade. I can actually increase the opacity as well. So we have this kind of a drop for the pergola. Now guys, understand one thing, when we're talking about drop shadow and inner shadow, it's going to act the same way as our plan. We just have to focus and see it in a different manner. So when we're talking about inner shadow, I'll be giving inner shadow to this top wall, to the top mid wall. Now, why is that happening? Because guys, when I increase the distance over here, and let's say I actually change the angle only from this one single side, and I'll just give it 180 degrees over here. I can reduce the distance. I can actually increase the size from here. So what happens is, because the inner shadow is coming from here, right, this wall automatically starts to feel like it is recessed, it is inside. So that's what we're going to do with this inner shadow. And when we talk about now the bottom mid wall, I can actually go ahead and give inner shadow again to this. And we can increase the size as well as the distance and the size from here. And I can press OK. So we'll be having something like this, guys, which will look. And what I'll do is I'll now give a drop shadow to my top side, and I'll tell you why I'm giving a drop shadow, because of course it's an exterior massing, guys, right? Switch off the global light, and I'll want the shadow to actually fall below on this wall as well as on this wall. So I can actually just increase this distance, and you can see that's as perfect as I want it, and I can increase the size as well. Now we have noticed that we have given the drop shadow here, so the actual shadow is falling, you can see, on this wall. So that's actually giving the effect that these walls are actually protruding outside. But what we can do is, instead of giving the top mid, which is this wall, instead of giving it an inner shadow from the left side, right, we can just shift it to the right side. So you guys can see that. I'll just shift it to the right side. Let's give it 0 over here in the angles. And this change we can only figure out once we are working all together, right? So you saw, because I gave the shadow from here, I realized that if this is dropping a shadow on this wall anyway, why don't we give an inner shadow from this side to actually make it look more recessed inside? So that will actually kind of make it look much better in a way. Now when we're talking about this wall, guys, the bottom side wall, we can even give a drop shadow of this wall itself. And I'll actually just go ahead and switch off the global light and shift this down to 180. Right, and we can increase the distance and as well as the size. And I'll just increase the distance slightly as well. So we've got shadow now coming from here, which is going to actually give recessment to both these walls. And our columns will also get a shadow actually, which will be a drop shadow. And I can actually go ahead and increase this, but I will switch off the global light and change this to 180 as well, right? And we'll increase the size also. And I can just decrease this distance slightly. So again, you can see we have shadow popping in from here as well as here as well as here, which makes us understand that the columns are in front of this particular wall. So this is basically something that we're going to do to set up the shadows for our sketch, for our elevation, guys. Now when we talk about the windows, I will be reducing the opacity slightly as well as the opacity of the railing. Of course, it's glass in the end of the day, so the opacity will be reduced, right? And the best part about reducing the opacity is, guys, you can see I can now see a slight shadow coming in from here. So we're able to actually see the behind portion of this wall itself. So that's a good thing that we can actually, see the behind portion of the shadow, which will actually make it look much better. And what we can do is, to our window itself, we can give an inner shadow, and that inner shadow will switch off the global light, and I'll just increase this distance as well as the size. Basically what that inner shadow will do, it will actually give a little depth to our windows also. So this is something that we will do to create the entire rendering of our elevation, guys. And we'll obviously go ahead to bring in objects. We can also add a door over here, and we'll be adding some silhouettes as well. So I'll be showing you guys how to do that in the next topic. I just want you guys to focus on providing the materials and the shadows. This might be a little different than the plans, but I'm sure if you guys watch it once or maybe twice, you will understand exactly how we solve these. So all the best, guys. I'll see you in the next topic. Till then, please finish this off and take care.